Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. A new job, a job which is supposedly only part-time, has completely consumed both my brain and my emotional life lately. I was very glad to be able to take off a couple of days for Thanksgiving, and I had a lovely time making dinner with my spouse David on Thursday and having a potluck on Friday evening with our family, the group of families who've been our closest friends for almost 2 decades now. All of the other families had children home from college for the weekend, except for us. Our son stayed at school to finish writing papers, but he'll be home for winter break very soon, this weekend. The fact that I film in his bedroom may mean that my videos will go up even later in the day. Our days were full of bookish and non-bookish things. I read 2 short novels and 1 nonfiction book, and finished another nonfiction book I had started earlier. More on the books later. Although we are not major holiday decorators for Thanksgiving or for any other holiday, one of my very favorite items comes out this time of the year. This is a handmade turkey made out of a dried gourd. No, we didn't make it, but we liberated it from Value Village, our local thrift store charity shop. As for our culinary celebrations, we split our Thanksgiving feast into several meals. Homemade sourdough bread with prune jam for breakfast, a salad with dried cranberries and walnuts for lunch served with curried butternut squash soup, a small but relatively traditional meal in the evening with one of my favorite simple desserts, cranberry apple bread from the battered copy of one of the original Moosewood cookbooks. On another day, we made homemade Pop-Tarts with cranberry sauce and pumpkin puree. And then for dinner that night, we followed the pattern and made savory Pop-Tarts, or perhaps we could call them hand pies, with mashed sweet potatoes and leftover turkey. Delicious, and just decadent enough to be perfect for the holiday. My favorite tradition, but definitely not my favorite drink, is the cranberry champagne cocktail we make every year, with a sugar cube at the base of the glass, moistened with cranberry bitters before adding the bubbly. I think if we had reasonable cranberry bitters, it might be delicious. As it is, with our horribly artificial bitters, we grimace at the first swallow every year, and look forward to grimacing again the next year. Tradition. On Thanksgiving afternoon, my husband and I took a long walk down and then along the creek near our house. The leaves were just perfect for this cold and cloudy fall day. We walked along the paved paths over small bridges, and we were thrilled to see a heron at the water. Herons are not something we see a lot of in this spot, so it was quite exciting. Although we didn't used to see many deer in our relatively urban neighborhood with its small yards and abundant traffic, human development in some of their other favorite spots has chased them to new places, including our backyard. This young deer watched me carefully, but did not run away, even after it startled when it heard the click of my camera. On to more bookish pursuits. The first is actually just book adjacent. One evening, David and I watched the recent documentary about Toni Morrison, The Pieces I Am. What a wonderful piece of work the film is. I was especially impressed by Morrison's ability to combine 2 ideas that are sometimes seen as if they're in opposition. Morrison absolutely insists on the responsibility to write about the experiences of African American women, subjects who have, over the years, often been absent in both fiction and nonfiction. At the same time, the author is equally adamant that these stories are just as universal as any other story. And part of what makes it universal is having the point of view be truly that of, in this case, African American women, and the audience be anyone, including African Americans. She abandons what she describes as almost a Jiminy Cricket, a white man sitting on her shoulder, enforcing the idea that all stories by minorities must be told and explained essentially for white readers. Writing specifically for that white gaze, unconsciously or consciously, holds back the story. limits the novel, keeps it from being that opening that books can be. Books about lives we know and about lives we don't know. Thinking about books opening us up reminds me of that fantastic idea by the children's literary scholar Rudine Sims Bishop. She says that we need two kinds of books in our lives. First, books that are mirrors, that is, books that show us ourselves, showing us that we are not completely erased or repainted in stereotypes. White men have seen mirrors in almost every book they've read, and white women have seen a lot of mirrors too, but only seeing mirrors gives us a distorted vision. White readers, and all readers, also need books that are windows, that allow us to see out of our own little box and into the worlds of people who are different from us. Let me read you a passage from her essay. Books are sometimes windows, offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created and recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. One of the nonfiction books I read over the short break was Toni Morrison's collection of essays called The Origin of Others. Published in 2017, it begins with an introduction by Ta-Nehisi Coates, then presents 6 essays based on the Norton Lectures she presented in the fall of 2016. Barack Obama was president when she started. Black Lives Matter was gaining traction as a movement, and many Americans assumed that our next president would be a woman with a commitment to what Martin Luther King called the moral arc of the universe, bending towards justice. As Coates writes in the introduction, we realized on the night of the 2016 election that the arc was longer than we had hoped. Although it must have changed the arc of Morrison's lectures as well, her words have become even more important. These essays are combinations of the personal, the political, the historical, the literary, and not surprisingly, they're beautifully written. It's a very slim book, with some repetition of passages from a few of her other novels. A quick read, which left me wanting more. Stay tuned if you want to hear a bit more from me about this book. I've chosen a couple of passages from this book to share on Sunday for my contribution to Sunday Sentences. I also finished the nonfiction book Flat, Reclaiming My Body from Breast Cancer by Catherine Guthrie, but I'm not going to go into that here. I want to talk about it in conjunction with another book that, at least for me, is related. As I said earlier, I read 2 novels over break, Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone and Ali Smith's Autumn. Much to my surprise, the 2 books have a lot in common. Both books are slim and spare. Both books have national politics or national tragedies at their core, but are fundamentally about small and personal stories at the same time. Both novels are written across time, with time circling in and out and back and forth across the pages. Both contain characters that I find quite compelling, and both novels let these characters shine in chapters where they hold their point of view. Both make many meaningful references to major works of literature, and, to my mind, both Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone and Ali Smith's Autumn have endings that are rather disappointing. Red at the Bone is beautifully written for the most part. The author has a way of pairing bare language, tight imagery, and emotion, which creates prose that resonates with me deeply. The story starts as a young African-American girl celebrates her 16th birthday in what seems like a cotillion. For the party, she's wearing a white dress originally made for her mother, but which her mother never got to wear because she became pregnant shortly before she turned 16. The rest of the novel traces how the girl, her parents, and both of their parents and grandparents experienced their lives over the years, contrasting their backgrounds with each other, but also exploring how they experienced love and death, violence on a personal and national scale, wealth and education, and the effort to create a better future. Although there is a clear plot, the story is larger than a specific plot line. To me, at least, it seems strongest in its creation of memorable characters and resonant emotions. It's a lovely book, with a few moments that don't quite ring true, but many sections that are quite moving. There are times when I felt a great need to have more explanation, more backstory. For example, because class and wealth are big thematic lines, I really wanted to understand why or how the families lived the way they did. But Woodson holds back from sharing anything with us that we don't actually need to know. Although I sometimes felt frustrated, I admit that in many ways that narrative style was actually quite successful. As many of you have seen in my Books with Friends tag, my husband read Ali Smith's Autumn before I did. In general, I find out about books from BookTube or print or online reviews, and then put books I want to read on hold at our local library. Often the books take a long time to make that slow climb up the whole list, and when they reach the top, invariably 10 other books come in at the same time. I bring them home, stacked with a large dark blue library bag next to the couch. Often I make a careful plan about how I'm going to tackle them. David, who sits on that side of the couch, often just leans over to pick one up. Sometimes I wonder why he's picked a particular one. Was it an author he's heard about? A cover he likes? The one on top, easiest to reach? For many years, he identified himself as a plot-driven reader, and for that reason alone, I would never in a million years have thought to hand him an Ali Smith book. But he picked it up and loved it. Over Thanksgiving, I read it and loved it too, although perhaps not quite as much as he did. He talked about his responses in that Book with Friends video, and he pulled out most of the reasons I enjoyed this book so much. The relationships, the portrayal of illness and dying, the wordplay. The two of us have talked a bit about the way in which the book situates itself in current politics, while keeping the focus on larger questions. A style that makes this book not feel like a trendy read that will have no meaning when history marches on. Smith refers both directly and obliquely to Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, and while her reference has more to do with his language of the coexistence of opposites, it serves another purpose too. Her time-specific novel will not become dated any more than the Tale of Two Cities is dated. Ali Smith refers to other classic books as well, including The Tempest, and the book named after its most famous line, Brave New World. One of my favorite images is Miranda, the young female character from Shakespeare's play, reading Huxley's novel. Time circles around, and books from different times talk to each other over our library shelves every day. One of the ideas in Smith's book, which will stick with me longest, is the elderly Daniel's advice to young Elizabeth that she should forgo college and instead go to collage. And it's about various collages as well. It paints portraits of people and worlds by looking at particular moments, at particular images, and putting them next to each other to build something unexpected. It's not a book with a straightforward plot, which leads me to a brief and spoiler-free discussion of the ending. Personally, I was a little taken aback when Smith suddenly divulges some big plot points right at the end. I was loving living in that collage with its swirling and uncertain picture. I really didn't want it all wrapped up in a bow at the end. Similarly, I didn't love the ending of Red at the Bone either. I won't spoil it, but I'm going to say something that will suggest the general tone of the end of the book. If you want to avoid even that foreknowledge, feel free to turn off the video now. At the end, we are left with a story of clear success in the traditional meanings of success in America. And success happens for reasons that are predicted, but not made meaningful by the text. What we don't get is any sense of success or resolution in relationships. So, after sketching out my video for Sean's E ending, I find it a little amusing that I then read 2 novels with endings I found disappointing. Nevertheless, there were enough wonderful things that I'm looking forward to picking up more works by both Woodson and Smith. In fact, I think Smith's Winter just made its way to that library stack next to the couch. Thanks for joining me today. See you soon on Hannah's Books.